All right, so we have done everything we needed to we needed to do in order to get our virtual machine up and running smoothly and configured smoothly. So as you can see now, I'm in my work resource group, the one I made, and this is to keep uh, everything that I'm making that'll be working together grouped together. So as you can see, I have my virtual network. I do have a Bastion network that I already made in case I'm on a device that doesn't have RDP. I can just RDP via the web browser. And I also have the public IP address settings for my virtual network. We'll get into that in a separate video. So here are my devices, and once I make my virtual machine and my hard drive and all that, it's going to be in this same group. So let's get started in making our first virtual machines. Now, Azure, you can go back to Home, you can click on virtual machines, or in the search, this is just the fastest way of doing anything. You don't want to work too hard, guys. So you can just type in virtual machine because that's the resource we want to make. We got scale sets, we got classic, but we're going with virtual machines. All right. So here we are. I don't have any virtual machines right now. If I did, it would have been in this list, given the name of it, the type of virtual machine it is, the subscription it's assigned to, the resource group is part of, the location or the region it's located, the status, if it's running, if it's off, deallocated, the operating system, and the size of the virtual machine, which is, I want to say the size of the hard drive, I believe. It may be the size of the RAM. So here we're going to go create, and they do have preset configurations. So if you want a machine that will act as a server or something like that, it will have preset configurations, so you don't have to do everything manually. But we're going to go to good old Azure Virtual Machine create, right? So let this page load up here. I don't know why I want to slow down right when I'm making a virtual machine, but okay. And let's say this is going to be our DC controller. So with a DC controller, the main controller, it's not going to have the regular Windows 10 OS. It's going to have the Windows Server OS. So here across the top are the different tabs, and these are the steps that we're going to go throughout all the way to review and create to make our machine. So these are the things that Azure must have in order to create a virtual machine successfully. So, step one, the basics, right? Once again, as when making any new resource in Azure, you have to subscribe the subscription. So I only have one subscription, so I'm clicking on that, which is auto selected. But if you have multiple subscriptions and you have different cards charging multiple subscriptions, you don't have to decide which subscription. So let's say if in an enterprise environment, you may have a business may have different subscriptions for their IT team. So they may have a subscription for marketing, right? They may have a subscription for billing. They might got a subscription for HR. So these are different subscriptions, and based on the subscription you're a part of or you have, it will determine your level of access to Azure. So right now, uh, I have access to not only creating virtual machines and things like that, but I also have access to create Azure Active Domain, which is a cloud-based Active Directory instead of being server or on-premises based. All right, so now we got his subscription, the only subscription that I have. The resource group. Remember, we're going to put this in our group one that we made, that had already made prior to the video, that I gave an example of earlier. So we're going to put it in that RG. So that way, if we end up having to delete this resource, I can delete the virtual machine. I can delete the public IP that's assigned to the virtual machine. I can delete the hard drive, all that in one go. But if I don't put it on a resource group, which I believe resource group are required. It's required to have your stuff in a resource group. If you don't have a resource group, it's going to create a new one. So this is apart from, like, if I delete the virtual machine, then I'll have to separately go and find a hard drive and delete that too. Then I got to go find the IP address and the NIC card and delete that too. So having a resource groups gives you the power of deleting and erasing things, entirely. So you don't have to worry about going all through Azure trying to find every little part of that virtual machine that you made and trying to delete it. Virtual machine name. So as you know, this is going to be a domain controller. So I'm going to call it DC1 because that's what it's going to be called on my network so I can identify it. I will keep it in the East region. As you can see, there's two regions in the East, but I'm going to keep it in the East US. Um, security type. We're going to leave it standard. It's going to leave that basic. Not going to get into that image. So the image is us seeing us choosing our actual operating system image. So of course you can got Ubuntu and look at the choices we have here. We have Windows 11 Pro, we have Windows 10 Pro, we have Windows Server 2019. Data center, we have Ubuntu Server. Look at that, Ubuntu Server. We have SUSE Enterprise. We have Red Hat, Oracle. These are all the things that you can play around with on Azure, different operating systems. So if you've always been on Windows and you never really experienced with Linux, this is your chance. Or if you've always been with Linux and you haven't really experienced with Windows, this having a virtual machine or multiple virtual machines give you an opportunity to test out those operating systems, experience those operating systems without having to go out to Walmart or anything like that and actually paying $300 to $500 to buy a system. So you got CentOS, Windows Server, blah, 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 blah. So in this one, I'm going to use Windows Server 2019. I'll use 2022 just to be fancy, right? So this is Azure Edition. I don't want Azure. I just want the 2019 data center uh, Gen 2. So let's click on that. I want Windows Server and everything like that. So that loads up. I don't know what those error messages were, but okay. So now it asking me what architecture do I want it for ARM 64, which is for mobile devices, and 64-bit system. So we do want 64-bit system. Run with Azure Spot discount. So Azure Spot, if I click on this, it's going to dramatically decrease my price for a month. Uh, so with Azure Spot, if Azure, the cloud service, get into some type of situation where they need more resources for a high demand client, they will actually take this machine offline and deallocate it, and then they would use those resources for someone else. So that's for something that I don't. If I don't really care, I'm just practicing this for maybe today. I'm not really looking to have this on my account for months at a time or whatever like that. I would use Azure Spot so I can play with it until Azure needs. I basically play around with it until Azure needs that space. So right here it says capacity only. Your virtual machine will be evicted from Azure's excess capacity. It says price or capacity. Your virtual machine will be evicted when Azure SS. So basically, you're choosing what happens when Azure needs that space. But I don't want this spot because I do want this DC1 to stay continuously running on my uh, virtual network because it's a domain controller. So I don't want them to come in, delete my domain controller, and then my whole network's down, in this situation. So if I didn't care about it, if I was just practicing this just for today, then I would do Azure Spot. And like I say, if I do Azure Spot, it does take the price down to per hour. So now we're going to make the username and password for our virtual machine. So this would be the built-in admin account, right? So you don't have to call it admin. You can call it, user one or Fred or whatever you want your name to be. I usually go with AZ admin because in my environment, I know regular admin is the built-in user account, and AZ admin I know it's like a virtual machine that I made in Azure. So my password is going to be a password that I usually use for everything. Well, not everything, but usually for the cloud. So let's do. All right. So my passwords do match up. So this is the account we'll use to actually log on to the system. This will be the initial user account on that local system. Um, and I do want to allow RDP, but I also want to allow internet connection to my domain controller. Of course, this isn't ideal for corporate environments, but this is just for testing purposes. So I'm going to open all my ports up so I can go and navigate whatever I got to do. Uh, we don't have an existing Windows Server license, so uh, I think that's required, but we're going to click next on disks. All right, this we want the premium SSD. It's best. I mean, you could do standard. You could do standard HDD, but premium SSD is gonna be good. It's not gonna really too much affect your price. It's gonna affect the price, but it's not like, oh man, I can come out a lot cheaper. 30% cheaper getting an HDD. Like, no, premium SSD is just fine. Delete this with the VM. So if I delete the VM, I want this. Do I want this hard drive to delete too? Yes. So I'm gonna leave that check. Most of this we're going to leave default, encryption type default. So here we got disk for DC1. We don't have a disk, so we're going to create a disk, a hard disk for it, and we're going to give it 1 terabyte, which is 1024 gigabytes. Uh, this is for our domain controller. I don't think I would need a 1 terabyte size on my hard drive for my domain controller. So, oh no, yeah, this is create a new hard drive. So let's do let's just do 512 gigabytes. I don't think I need like a 1 terabyte. It's just a domain. It's not a file server. I'm not going to use it as a file server. It's just a domain controller. So 500 gigabytes is fine. Enable shared disk. No, delete disk with the VM. Please, yes, delete this hard drive with the VM. So I'm gonna click OK. And now we got DC1 data disk 0, and it's what I'm saying, it's ready. So now networking. Let's put this on our network. So we got virtual network AZVNet1. That's my created virtual network. So I'm going to leave that as default. My subnet, I'm going to keep is the default subnet in that network. So had I made different subnets in that network, I can come here and choose a different network like sub 2. I'm going to put this on sub 2. All right. So public IP address. I do want this DC to have a public IP address because that's how I'm going to access it through RDP. Basic network security group. Network security groups acts like a firewall. Basically, it you go to your network security group and you determine what traffic is allowed in and out, just like a firewall. It's just cloud, right? Um, So I did my ports, delete public IP and network interface card when VM is deleted. Yes, whenever I delete the VM, I want everything to delete with it. I don't want the VM gone and then my hard drive is left on my account because that's unnecessary money and that's a storage. Okay, so log on with Azure Active Directory. I don't have an Active Directory set up in Azure just of yet, so I'm not going to enable that. For now, I'm going to log in to the local account that I created earlier using AZ admin. I'm going to leave all this default. Monitoring, default, advanced. I'm going to leave all this default. Tags, if you want to add your tags, you can. If not, it's telling us that we made 12 resources in this. See, all this is going into one virtual machine, your security group, your IP address, all that. And then we're going to review and create and let this validation run, validation passed, and we're going to click on create. And that's how easy it is to create a virtual machine in Azure. So now it's going to do our deployment, and it's going to take about 5 or 6 minutes roughly, maybe even less. And it's going to deploy our virtual machine. Deployment in progress, and let's wait for this to get done.